Hey everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row and welcome back to the Horseshoe. It's October, there's football actually going on right behind us. The media viewing period is over, but we can still have a practice report brought to you by Byers Auto. That's Tim May and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward, and guys, it felt normal a little bit. We were wearing masks and we were out in the stands, but we got to see football. The Buckeyes were out there. This is the new normal, and I kind of enjoyed it.
The weather was crisp, to say the least. Kerry Combs and Austin Ward were in shorts along with Ryan Day. Yeah, I think everything looked normal out there. We actually saw a little bit of hitting, right?
Yeah.
You know, it was more like tracking down, as they were talking about on the interviews the other day, more like tracking down and tackling guys on the run. But bottom line is we did see some hitting. We saw guys in pads. Football season is right around the corner.
It just felt like almost like a normal fall day. We wake up, you get to the stadium at 8:45, you walk in.
Goes the wrong way.
I went the wrong way on the streets. It felt pretty normal to me. But I'm just glad to see most of the team here running around. They seem to be having a good time. I think the thing that I'm always most shocked by is when you see the guys, just the way that their faces are. Like, they're so much happier when they can play football. And you see it, the music's playing, the guys are excited, and for Buckeyes fans that have obviously been waiting a long time to see them back on the field, we're 3 weeks away, and it felt more real today than ever. I mean, you still never know what's going to happen between now and the 24th, but it felt more real today than it has.
Yeah, you slipped it in there. You said it. Most of the team was here. We can tell you that not all of the team was here, but at this point, we're not going to be naming names because that is subject to change. We don't know exactly what. Could be injuries, could have been classes, could have been something. Could have been a positive test. So Ohio State is not going to be making any sort of official announcements about that until week of the game. They're going to have an availability report. So that's out of the way. We're not just going to go down 1 through 99.
But don't leave everybody hanging. Everybody I was interested in watching today, for the most part, was here.
Justin Fields was here. Sean Wade was here. Wyatt Davis. If there was a major absence, then maybe we'd press the issue a little bit more. But there were not. And the fact that Justin Fields was out there leading the offense, I think, is probably what people are most curious about.
Yeah, absolutely. And number three, I mean, there were some guys there that I saw for the first time really in Ohio State uniforms that impressed me, not the least of which was Julian Fleming. Yeah.
He's a grown man.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, that's a freshman, right? Wide receiver. I mean, he looks the part. And Sean Wade seemed to be having fun out there. Zach Harrison got some call-outs from Quinn Temple over the big mic on a couple of occasions. Zach Harrison looks bigger and just as fast, etc. I mean, it's going to be an interesting fall.
There's a couple guys to me that look different. Baron Browning is one. We saw it even in the interview process on Thursday talking to him. He just seemed like a totally much more relaxed, much more at peace with himself type of player. I don't know if it's because, normally at a media scrum we have 40 media guys standing around one player, and I guess that can probably feel a little overwhelming. Maybe it's just because he's sitting there by himself talking to a camera. Who knows? But it seemed like Barron was much more comfortable Thursday than I've ever seen him. And
I want to interject. I agree 100%. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then I see him today, and he looks way bigger. He looks different. Justin Fields looks like he's a created player on NCAA 14. Like, he's not a normal quarterback. He doesn't look like what a quarterback looks like. The vegan diet's working.
Yes,
I guess. And then
let's wear this storyline out right away.
But then the other one I want to talk about is all four of those freshman receivers, because they're going to be sort of one of those storylines that's interwoven throughout the whole year because there's so many expectations on them. They all looked really good, but they all looked really different. And Mookie Cooper, I'm telling you what, that dude, he's got some wiggle. That guy is not going to be easy for people to track down.
It's interesting.
I feel like Ed McMahon over here. Yes.
I mean, you started with Julian Fleming. You started over here with Mookie Cooper, and then I had to double check the roster. I'm like, 13. That's a grown man. Somebody changed numbers. No, that's G. Scott. He looks like a senior. Then they go through one-on-ones, and Jackson Smith and Jigga with a one-handed grab. It's like all four of those guys are phenomenal talents. Now, I don't know exactly how many catches they're going to have, how many snaps they're going to play, but there is a role for all four of those
I want
guys.
to tell you something. I'm watching Garrett Wilson, lining up in that tight slot and stuff, and replacing KJ Hill in their minds. Sure. And I understand exactly what Ryan Day is thinking there because, really, when you get right down to it, he's probably a faster,
he's an evolutionary KJ Hill.
Evolutionary KJ Hill And you can see that, and that's another element of this offense that's going to be different this coming fall if they get to all those elements. And then, of course, Trey Sermon, you got to see him run around a little bit and stuff. I'm sure he missed being on the field last week with Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma missed him more than he missed
Trey
Oklahoma.
Sermon more than he missed the Sooners.
Exactly, but I mean, it was fun.
Sorry, I got
It was fun to watch.
Just a little excited over there. Master Teague, and he led the line, so that doesn't mean that that's the depth chart or anything like that. He's the veteran presence, veteran for the Buckeyes anyway. And, the fact that he was out there to be the first one is still pretty remarkable to me because a March Achilles tear, and I know that they're all different, but we've seen this before with Justin Hilliard and Tough Borland where they just weren't quite the same. Who knows? We didn't see Master Teague get hit or taken to the ground, but even that he was participating, and we knew that he had been, but that's still put on full pads and run. 6 or 7 months after an injury like that is pretty amazing.
Well, like I talked with his dad, Dr. Corey M. Teague, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago on my podcast, the more time you can put between that and when you have to actually play again, this has really played into his favor as far as that goes. And, Tough Borland brought it up the other day on the teleconference. I mean, he didn't really get over that Achilles almost the entire year. And one of the reasons might have been because he probably tried to come back earlier than maybe, he probably should have, but he still played. But, the more time he can put between that. And we all know Master Teague's possibilities just being that brute runner. Mm-hmm. And Trey Sermon, if he can add, some topping to that, so to speak, it's going to be an interesting year. If Marcus Crowley, is still up in the air, what his situation is.
He was out there, and that's the good news is they were all out there. I mean, from what I saw as they started doing more drill stuff, Steel Chambers was taking the second reps ahead of Master Teague. But as you said, we don't know what these lines really mean. Like all day long, C.J. Stroud was the second quarterback. So does that mean C.J. Stroud is the backup? I don't know, because Gunnar Hoke was actually taking reps behind Jack Miller. So does that mean squat? Who knows? I know that what we know is that C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller look physically like they belong in college. I mean, for two guys that a year ago were kind of on the smaller side, skinnier side, they looked like they put on some really solid weight. And you just wonder, as a quarterback, because we've talked a lot about how losing this spring hurts them from a development standpoint. But in a way, getting this extra year to kind of just work out helps them from a physical standpoint. So maybe they'll be more ready to take a hit in college.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the long-term benefit for C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller for their careers is that this entire year is free for them.
Yeah.
And they will get to play. There won't be any 4-game redshirt situation. If they can get in 6 games or every game in November, then they'll be allowed to with no penalty. This, in some ways, sets Ohio State up for the future at quarterback much better than any other situation. Now, it's still not ideal. If Justin Fields were to go down, the Gunnar Hoke situation, I still don't believe that Ohio State is extremely comfortable putting him in the game. And C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller, even just looking physically the part out there, I wouldn't say that they're ready to be the number 2 for a national championship team. So that's in the short term, you still have to keep Justin Fields in a bubble and never touch him and make sure that he's ready to go. In the long run, for those 2 freshmen in particular, this is a big deal.
Yeah. And the other, and you touched on it, Jack Miller looks like a different person to me. I mean, he looks taller than he did and definitely larger than he did. So, that puts him in good stead. Jumping ahead, I mean, I'm sitting there watching Pete Werner run around a little bit, and I'm just going, this moving him to Will, as we talked about it in Rapid Reaction the other day, but I think that's going to pay huge dividends. This is a guy with deep, deep savvy and when it comes to playing the game now, because he's been all over the field when you think about it. And one of the stories I've got coming, is it's interesting to me, like you brought up Baron Browning and Tough Borland. Those are guys that have been here for a while, but you've got these other guys champing at the bit who want to play, and I've got a story coming on that later, but, I don't know how you keep all those guys happy. What's your take? I mean, it's going to be an interesting fall for the linebacker.
I think they're going to have to go,
because you got to take advantage of that ridiculous experience.
Yeah, I think you'll have to just go talk to the rushmen who've been dealing with this for 5 or 6 years, where Sam Hubbard and Jalen Holmes were becoming NFL draft picks and playing 25, 30 snaps a game. I mean, this is probably where that's heading for the linebackers. I think Tough Borland has even hinted at that himself, that if you're looking for somebody, a coverage linebacker, he's probably not going to be that guy. So you swap out and have somebody else who can bring that, whether that's Taraja Mitchell or Dallas Gant. You just rotate. And I think that they understand that Berm has talked about this before with Gant and Taraja Mitchell and Kayvon Pope. Like, if they weren't okay with that sort of role, they could have easily left by now.
They've had 3 years to leave.
This year in particular would have been very easy to do so.
I think as a group, and I talked to BB Landers about this on Thursday night at Urban Meyer's Pint House when we were there for the weekend kickoff show. He said that he thinks Pete Werner is one of the most underrated players in college football. Not at Ohio State, but in college football. And I know he takes a lot of heat for some reason, but Pete Werner played in a remarkably good junior season.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's on track to be a top 2 or 3 round NFL draft pick, especially now that he's up 245 pounds. I just think that it's one of those situations, and I said it on Thursday on the practice report then, like, the linebackers this year have to be the glue of the defense, and they haven't had to be the last few years. So you're glad you have this depth of leadership, but you also want to make sure these guys are getting a chance to play everywhere behind them. So the Dallas Gants, the Taraja Mitchell, and I'm going to keep banging the drum. I think Craig Young is the most athletic player on the defense, maybe outside of Zach Harrison, as far as like pure athlete.
Wow. Cameron Martinez, sorry.
Well,
yeah.
Wow. Well, we'll talk about my boy Cam. Cam looked good. Did you see him?
Oh, yeah.
Cam looked good. He's getting comfortable there at defensive back.
Him?
He's getting comfy. Oh, you'll
wasn't
see him.
allowed to
You'll
look.
see him in the photo gallery.
Look away.
No, I think Craig Young is I think he might be the most athletic player on the defense, and we're still not sure how or if we'll see him.
You know what all of this conversation has reinforced is the fact I keep telling everybody this is as deep a roster as I've ever covered at Ohio State. I'm not saying people misconstrue that. I mean, I'm not saying that this is the most outstanding players I've ever seen there. Orlando Pace has still not been duplicated in my mind, et cetera, but it just a depth that we're talking about just at the linebacker spots is an example of what I'm talking about, of like outstanding guys that you think if they got a chance or two to play would really stand out. That's what I'm talking about. And, like you brought up in a story the other day, and we're talking about it, the only question mark you've really got about this defense in my mind, because I think they're going to find 5 or 6 guys that can play in the secondary on a consistent, good basis, is that middle part of the defensive front. Yeah. I mean, as much as we like Tommy Togiai and these guys, they haven't really been the fellows yet.
Well, Teron Vincent's been incapable of staying healthy. He's a guy who's not here today because he's had another arm issue.
Yeah.
You just don't know who fits that gap. And it's not like in previous years where you had a big defensive end that could almost mirror as a 3-tech, where you had, going back to like Adolphus Washington even, or the way that Jalen Holmes got moved inside, the way Nick Bosa would play. This roster doesn't really have that guy.
I think Tyler Friday's that guy personally. But
he could be.
He might end up being that guy.
He might need to be that guy. I don't know that physically, he's not in that 280 range.
All right.
The Jayshon Cornell types. He's a 255, 260-pound defensive end. So it's going to require some flexibility from Larry Johnson that I don't think we've had to see, because they do need somebody to step up in that middle, and it's not going to happen with probably Darion Henry-Young or Jacoby Cowan yet. Now, does Ty Hamilton step up into that role? I don't know. Somebody's going to have to emerge.
But here's what's going to come. It might not be Nebraska, but Penn State's going to probe there. Michigan State's going to probe there. Michigan for sure will. Their test is coming.
You think it was just a coincidence that flex period started and the Nebraska highlights were up?
I don't believe in coincidences anymore.
I believe in coinky dink.
It was funny. I was just sitting there watching it. They were stretching. Nebraska highlights are up there, and it's crazy to think. You see Chase Young. I see Jordan Fuller making an interception. You see J.K. Dobbins, KJ Hill, Austin Mack, Ben Victor making plays. They're all up there.
Okuda.
It's like, man, that's a lot of talent that team lost. And then you look at the field and you're like, oh, they're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
Forget about all that.
Recruiting matters.
Yeah, it sure does. Stars matter too, I think. This is a practice report. It was brought to you by Byers Auto. That's Tim May and Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. A lot more coverage just a couple weeks away from being back here in this building to see a real game, and they won't kick us out before the pads start actually flying around. That'll be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that, and we'll have a lot of coverage at Lettermen Row. Until then, we'll see you next time.